Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, the podcast where we uncover the strategies to build your real estate portfolio one property at a time.
We're your hosts, Tyler and Tommy, here to share our story of playing real-life Monopoly.
Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, this is your go-to resource for mastering the real estate game.
So grab your board, roll the dice, and let's buy Boardwalk together. Welcome back to the Monopoly Mindset podcast, episode number 8. Last episode, we talked about my my only Burr deal that I bought a duplex, which was my first investment property. Like I said, it was probably my favorite deal, so it was a pretty good listen. And then this week, we are going to go over a couple of Tommy's next properties that he bought with partners. So we are starting to run out of properties that we own together, so we're gonna have to buy more to have new episodes. But no, and then we'll probably start having some guests on and just kind of do more topic specific podcast.
Yeah, this is how we want to get started. We wanted everybody to get a great update on where our real estate portfolios were at, how we kind of got here, and then, obviously continue talking day in the life of our real estate journey, playing real life Monopoly. I know we talked a little bit last week about getting HELOCs. Ty found a better bank that's offering up to like 90% loan to value, which then encouraged me to reach out to another bank, a couple more banks, and I found one that potentially offers 90% loan to value as well. So I'm going to apply through them and see how that pans out. And I'm already kind of moving through the hoops with Citizens Bank at the moment too. So I'm going to try to put that on hold and see if I can kind of get an answer from the other bank and if that 90% loan to value is available to me or not.
Yeah, we talked about a lot how banks give you like initial promises, I guess, or just initial like quotes up front. So I'm still in the initial phase, but yeah, I got a really sweet deal on the HELOC that I applied for. So they told me that I got prime plus 0%, which is the lowest that they offer. And basically what that means is typically on an adjustable rate, they go based on prime, which is just like the federal borrowing number. I think you can look it up in like the Wall Street Journal. It's printed every day, and that changes day to day, and that's what like the adjustable rate is based on. And so typically banks will offer like prime plus a number, so it'll be like prime plus 1.5. So today prime's 7.5. So if you got prime plus 1.5, your rate is always just 1.5% over what that prime number is. So in that example, your interest rate would be 9. So I apparently qualified for just prime, which is awesome because as far as I know, that's typically the lowest that most banks will do. I've never heard of under prime just because I think it'd be difficult for them to make money that way. But yeah, I got prime and then 90% loan to value, which is again awesome. It's kind of hard to find, but I guess it's depending on your area because I went to a local credit union. So
Yeah, and every local credit union's typically local to that state, so it's difficult for Ty being in Maryland for him to say, "Oh, use XYZ, credit union," because I'm not going to have access to them down here in Florida. And then in Florida, a lot of the banks here were using 80% loan to value, so it was difficult for me to find somebody that was offering 90%. And I had some options in Pennsylvania where they were offering it, but it's tough to get a HELOC on like a rental property. They don't offer some of the same products that they do on a primary residence.
yeah, and a lot of these local credit unions, I've heard this a lot since COVID. They're like short on cash. So in order for them to give you a loan, they want you to open up a checking and a savings account basically. And you don't even have to like put money into it. They might have like a $50 minimum, but I actually already have a loan through this bank, so I already have a checking and savings open through them. So I think that's one of the reasons that I applied for the HELOC is because it kind of just made it a lot easier since I was already like had an account with them and Yeah, so pretty excited, hoping to close in like 2 to 3 weeks on that, but we'll see if my rate changes.
Yeah, and we'll see how my process goes if I end up finalizing everything with Citizens, which I'm pretty much, about to do, or do I kind of pivot and get a 90% loan to value and see if I can get anything a little bit better here. So we'll keep everybody updated on that. Other than that, I don't think we had too much of an eventful week from a real estate perspective. Is there anything else you were dealing with?
No, I'm still trying to get quotes to get my hot tub moved like 40 yards. It's just sitting in the driveway, and the only quote that I got was 1,500, and I was like, that's crazy. So, I'm working on getting some other quotes.
Cool. So today's episode, we're going to talk a lot about partnerships, how I bought my next couple of properties. I started to run out of money and reached out to some friends. And partnerships can, you know, really make or break your success in real estate. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Brandon Turner, and it was really cool because he mentioned how partnerships are one of the best ways to grow your wealth in real estate. And, I kind of thought about it. It's something that I think is forgotten in a lot of like low money, no money, how to buy real estate in unique ways. And one of the simplistic ways that makes a ton of sense and can be a lot of fun is buying real estate in partnerships. Ty and I created a partnership, and it's been a lot of fun. And real estate's great. It's a great way to grow your wealth for sure, and I'd recommend buying it by yourself. But it's always more fun when you have somebody else to talk to about it, handle issues together. If I'm out at the golf course and a call comes in, Ty, or a partner can handle something like that. So partnerships have been, a very great way for me to help grow my wealth.
Yeah, and I think another like super important part of it is that I'm I'm still looking at like my first couple deals as like just getting experience. And let's say you have a bunch of partners that allow you to buy 5 properties, whereas if you didn't have partners, you could only do one property. You're getting, yes, you're splitting it, let's say 5 ways, but like you're getting 5 times the experience. And again, early on, I feel like that's the most important part is just to do it, get experience of those 5 properties, and then maybe later down the road, once you feel like you've kind of figured it out a little bit more and you're a lot more comfortable, you can always branch off on your own if you want, or if your partnership's going good, then just continue to grow with those people. But so you had, how many properties did you own at this point? I think 2 on your own. And then you decided to create a partnership.
Yeah, right after Sarah and I bought Center Street together, I started to realize that I didn't have much money and I only had one rental at the time, and I was making, a decent return. Interest rates were still like roughly 3 to 4% at that time. So a lot of the, numbers were cash flowing and making sense on paper. And I'm like, I really want to buy, another property, but I don't have any money. And I started calling like my whole Rolodex of friends and everybody I could think of, like, hey, who will buy real estate with me? Because I know this is making money. I've done it already. Like, I have proof of concept. Like, I can show you the numbers of what I've done previously. And so I called a lot of people. And, when you're 22, 23 years old and, you've bought 2 houses and you're trying to talk to other people that are 22 to 23 years old, a lot of them think you're kind of crazy maybe, or like, oh no, I'm never going to trust you to buy a house with you. Like, that's at least a lot of what I felt. Or a lot of people weren't in, oh, hey, that sounds great, but I don't have the 20 to $30,000 or the $15,000 saved up. And if I do have it saved up, like, I want it in the stock market. I want it here. So I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people and was not able to convince anybody to invest with me. But luckily, my buddy Dan picked up the phone. We had a good conversation, and he wanted to also bring his dad in. And it was actually a great idea because it made things a lot more affordable for Dan and I, just because we didn't, we were still younger. I didn't have as much money. So getting a third partner helped us gain a lot more capital so that we could buy, another house with less money out of pocket.
Yeah, I think the more experience you have, the more, or the the better your partnership's going to look from your end. So, for example, when you're just starting out, you can't go to somebody and be like, "Hey, give me, you pay 100% of the money. I'm going to do all the work," because they're going to be like, "You don't have any experience though." So like for them, it's a huge risk. So typically, I feel like early on in partnerships, you split the money 50-50, say. Even if you're doing all the work and you go to like some private lender that is going to give you the money, it makes sense that they're not going to pay for all of it because again, it's a risk for them. But then these, super great investors, their partnership deals look a lot sweeter because people want to invest with them. So like the more
Yeah.
experience you have, the more people want to invest with you. And so the more properties you have and you have this track record and you can show like, hey, this is what my past 5 deals looked like, then you definitely can get to a point where you're like, hey, you put down 100% of the money, I'll do all the work and we'll split the profits. And if you have a ton of experience, and a good proven track record, then it's going to be a lot easier to get, deals like that. But early on, I would say you probably are going to have to put some money into the deal.
Yeah, and again, like that's where if somebody's listening to this podcast and is wondering how to get into real estate, but you have 3 or 4 friends and you have $10,000 to $15,000 saved up, that's maybe something that the four of you can kind of go in. You split everything 25% each, and you can at least get that experience of buying one property. Like maybe 4 kids are going to be roommates or something like that, and they just go in and buy a house together and do some renovations together. Because properties are more expensive than they used to be, so trying to think of ways that are outside of the box, and partnerships are definitely a way to cut a down payment down significantly when you're splitting it multiple ways. And hey, a piece of something's a lot more than a piece of nothing. So
Yeah, or I do think with like four people that could get a little. It's just a lot of people, right? So like in 10 years, are you all gonna still have the same goals? But
for sure.
another way, is instead of like partnering up on a deal, find somebody that will lend you the money for the down payment at like again, when you're just starting out, you're gonna have to give them a pretty high return, say like 12%, because it's better than what they can get in the market, but they are taking a risk on you, so that risk is going to come with a higher return. But again, long term, like they're not part of the deal. They just lend you the money and you owe them the money back on a certain percentage. So that's just another option to try and get into it, without.
Yeah, and we'll probably do another episode on all the different variations of partnerships, and there's a ton of different ways to go about it. But for this example with TDJ, we just 3 friends, 3 buddies, that decided to create a company together and start buying real estate. We all became 33% partners. Um, it took us about a month to 2 to really form the company. It wasn't very hard. I believe Jeff had a lawyer buddy that handled everything pretty quickly for us. And a lot of people, get stuck in like, how are we going to create the company? And like, we kind of knew we were going to create a company. So we already started searching for properties. And, the formation of the company just kind of happened organically while we were searching for properties. We couldn't find a ton of what we liked, what we thought would fit our business model. And there's always certain times to buy real estate, right? Like I find now, especially in like northeastern Pennsylvania, is one of the worst times to buy. Just in like the winter, there's not as many properties for sale. I mean, it's a good time to buy if a property you like's on the market because you might be able to get a deal. But if from like a variety standpoint, there's not a ton of variety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, well,
Um,
people know that they're going to get the most for their house in the spring and summer, so they probably don't really list it in the winter because history has shown that house prices are much lower in like the winter than spring and summer.
yeah.
So
But
you
so
mentioned what was your business model? What type of properties were you guys looking for?
So, I mean, Dan and I were Misericordia football alum, and Jeff obviously went to Misericordia a ton to go to pretty much all of our football games. So, our business model was really just sticking to what I've done and buying properties around Misericordia, renting them out to students at the university, and, kind of finding properties that would be good for college students. That was really our, you know, target market, and that was really our business model. Was let's just buy a property, let's get something, maybe with some potential value that like we could fix it up a little bit. Really like try the burst strategy if it worked. But we really didn't have like the burst strategy wasn't a definite like we were going to do it. It was really just buy one property and like get it rented out and then just like see where it went from there. That was really just our initial business plan.
Yeah, you kind of did Burr on accident. Well, a version of Burr because like you didn't use hard money, but we can get into it. So, what did your first property look like that you bought together?
Yeah, our first property, Richards, it turned out to be a great deal. It was one that Jeff picked out. I don't think Dan and I necessarily loved it. It was kind of like a townhome, and it wasn't maybe what we were looking for. And it was also only 3 bedrooms and I think 2 baths, where we were typically looking for 4 bedrooms. But we went to a couple different houses that day. We hated all of them. Nothing really seemed to work. And we checked out the townhome, and it was like the best house that we looked at all day. And so we decided to put an offer in. And, a lot of the times when you are successful in real estate, it's when you get a really good deal. And this property was listed very cheap. Unfortunately, somebody's grandma passed away. They inherited her house and like they wanted nothing to do with it. And so we were able to get this townhome for like $100,000, which was relatively cheap at that time for some of the other properties that were on the market, and maybe even for that neighborhood. And we looked at the property, like again, we wanted a 4 bedroom for the college students, but it had a very beautiful basement that wasn't finished. And we were like, well, if we buy this house and we put in a bedroom in the basement, that might get us to the 4th bedroom that we really want to, get to. So that's what we did. We purchased the property. And as far as like a money perspective, when you're buying a house for $100,000 with 3 people involved, 20% down, it's roughly 20 grand. And I think the basement remodel was roughly 15. So what are we at? Like 35 all in. So splitting that 3 ways, I think we all put in like 15K each to really get this company started. So we had like a couple extra dollars, and there were some other things that we had to, pay for over time. But that's really how we got started. And we reached out to some college kids, and we found some tenants, and we put them in there. And it was, I want to say it was simple. Obviously, we had to have a plan. We had to, find the partners, but we had proof of concept from what I was doing previously. And so we just wanted to stick with that business plan and that model. And, for the first year, that property worked out great.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about 3 properties today, but I kind of want to go each one start to finish. So just so we're not jumping around.
Yeah.
So you got the college kids in there. Was this the one that was in the area that you found out you couldn't rent to college kids?
Yeah, so when we were going through the closing process, it's been rumored that you weren't allowed to have college students in this townhome community. And, being the smart guy that I think that I am, I read through all the guidelines, the rules, and everything in there said that their ordinances match what the township's ordinances were. And so I read through the township's ordinances, which said that you could not have 4 people blood related or less living in a house, which for us fit exactly what we were doing. It was 4 bedrooms. We had 4 students. We weren't breaking the rules. We were literally listening to the bylaws. However, people on the HOA were not very happy that they felt they were, I don't want to say outsmarted or tricked, because they were trying to say we weren't allowed to have the students. And I said I read the bylaws and things like that. So yeah, we ran into some issues with them. At the HOA meeting the following year, they brought an attorney to the meeting and let everybody know they were changing the bylaws. And they were going to change it to you could only rent to 2 people that were, excuse me, blood related or less. So that obviously took out the college students that we were renting to. And it was really just a slap in the face to us to say, like, hey, we don't want college students in our community. Granted, we were only given compliments about the students that were there. We were told that they were like the most lively people of the community. Everybody loved seeing them. Even though we had all these positive things about them, it was just like a principle thing. They did not want college students living there, and so they were going to give us a hard time until we got them out of there.
So how did I guess you just pivoted to single family. And one thing I wanted to say is like again talking about experience and like getting experience, you basically just got this pretty crappy experience and now you know going forward don't buy in this area if you're planning to rent to college kids. However, you got this experience at one third of the cost because you split it three ways. So
Yeah, you're right, Ty. Like getting into a property and, for one third of the cost and learning, as much experience as this property taught me, it's, one of the benefits of partners because you're not putting 100% of the money into it and you can still learn a lot. So, and then like I've kind of always been a person that tries to make lemonade out of lemons. And so, that conversation was obviously unique with the attorney kind of, pinpointing us and trying to get us to kick the students out. Luckily, they were nice about it and said we could keep them until the end of the lease. And so we started, trying to make the best out of the situation. We ended up finding another property and getting those kids once their lease ended to move into the other property. So we made the best situation there. And we were trying to keep our relationship with the football team. And so we found one of the assistant football coaches, I believe the offensive coordinator at the time, and we had them move into the house. And we kind of cut them, I don't want to say a deal, but rent was a little bit cheaper than maybe it could have been. But it worked for us because we didn't know, if we were going to be able to get anybody into that townhome and things like that. So it made the best out of the situation that we could. But, we've always known that property, once we couldn't get the students in it, wasn't fitting like our specific business model. We were always making a couple dollars less than we really would have liked. Um, but it was still a great property for us. We were later on able to, because again, we bought it for 100. We were able to, believe several months later, maybe even a year, we did a refinance and the property appraised for, I want to say 160. And so when you get like a 160 appraisal, you only owe $80,000 on the property. We were able to, do a cash out refinance and, kind of complete the burst strategy, even though it was more of a unique situation. It was really just because we got a great deal. I mean, the property was probably should have been sold for 125 to 130, but because the kids didn't really want anything to do with it, they listed it for 100, and we found a good deal on the MLS. And sometimes that happens. I know it's maybe not happening as much right now for certain people or what you're looking for, but it worked for us, and so we were able to pull some of that equity out and use that to purchase the next property that we did.
so you
Eventually, go
basically
ahead.
again you did like a unintentional, and it's not really a burr per se because like you didn't use the hard money, do the renovations and refinance right away, but it was kind of like a long-term burr that maybe took what, a year, 2 years maybe, so that in 2 years you probably did get all your money back if not more. So
Yeah, it was to your point, kind of a long-term, maybe accidental burr. And again, it wasn't really in our business model to burr at that time. It was like, let's just buy this property if it were and like it's gonna cash flow. And like that was really just buy real estate, and wait was really just our initial mindset. And then just fast forwarding like the life of that property, the in college football, you have a lot of different people moving here and there. And so we had, that coach moved on and we were, debating on who to rent that property out, to in the future. Should we wait for another coach to potentially put in there? And there was another close relationship we had with somebody at Misericordia. And so we ended up cutting him a deal. I won't say a deal. We still got a decent amount for rent. And he's been there for about 2 to 3 years now. And we're looking at seller financing to him because it's a property that, again, when you talk about our business model, what we're looking for from a college student perspective and like the money that we're looking to make on certain properties or just, again, like our business plan, that property does not fit really our business plan anymore. And so we looked at, selling it. And then, we kind of started talking to the tenant like, hey, we're looking at selling. And he was like, hey, well, I would love to buy it. I really love this place. I love it here. And so that's kind of the cool part of being a landlord. You build relationships with people over time. You try to help them out in situations that they're in. Interest rates are relatively high. So we kind of put together a plan where we get some money up front and then he rent to own kind of situation for like 2 to 3 years. And then once interest rates hopefully drop down, he can buy out the rest of the, what he owes us on and get a different loan at that time. So we kind of
Yeah,
thought
so I guess
it's a win for everybody.
yeah, it's not really seller financing though. It's more just rent to own because you guys aren't carrying like a mortgage for him, right? He's just paying you rent for 3 years, and none of that rent is going towards like the purchase price. So,
No, I might not have explained it to you correctly, but I believe that we are doing more of a seller finance situation. So we are putting together a loan. He's going to make the down payment. There is going to be interest on the loan. And so there is going to be a piece of it that does go to principal. So his principal will be a little bit lower. So I'm saying it rents to own. Maybe that's a lazier way of describing it, but it will be more of a seller financing situation. We're just going to hold, obviously, the note that we currently have with the bank, and then we'll have the secondary mortgage with him that's got a specific payoff at the end of the 3-year term.
so it's basically the same way that we bought our property,
Yes.
but you're selling it that way. Okay. Yeah, I actually, I don't think me and you, well, other than this property, like me and you don't really have intentions to sell, but in our networking group, a lot of the people that we've, been in contact with, they really love this seller, I guess rent to own strategy. We don't really want to sell properties, but the cool thing about this rent to own strategy is that one, they give you a down payment up front. So
Yep.
say 15 to $20,000. So a lot of these people they're getting into these properties for say 10,000 through like seller financing. And then they're immediately doing a rent to own contract where the tenant pays them say 15,000 or 20,000, and typically these contracts are set up so that the tenant now has to pay for all maintenance and repairs. So when you're, running the numbers, you typically set aside 10% for capital expenditures,
Yeah. Yep.
and
And vacancy
vacancy.
and other things.
So
Yep.
like you're basically your cash flow is going up a lot. And then again, if this person defaults or is behind on rent, say a month or whatever, then you basically just get to keep their down payment and they don't buy the house. So it seems like a really good strategy if you are looking to sell.
Yeah. And it's cool because I find that it just, strengthens like a relationship between people. And I mean, everything seems to be relationship based, right? And so you're really helping, a specific person that wants to get into a property. And again, interest rates are higher right now, so it's tougher to, get approved by a bank or just deal with the whole bank situation. I mean, Ty and I are both dealing with situations with banks at the moment. And so seller financing is a lot more like, I mean, hey, banks make a ton of money, especially when interest rates are 7% just to get a loan. I mean, they're making 7% just by loaning you that money. It's a very lucrative business for them. And so when you do seller financing, you're kind of becoming the bank. And so there's a lot of benefits and value to doing it this way.
Yeah, and also from what I hear, as soon as you sign that rent to own contract, even though the the tenant technically doesn't own the house yet, they think of it now as their house. So they're going to take care of it.
Yeah.
There's like a pride thing there where they're like, "Wow, I'm basically a homeowner." Like they love the house. It's their house, quote unquote, and they treat it as such. So
Yeah, and so we're in the process of seller financing now. It's been going on for about 2 to 3 months, and we're hoping to get it wrapped up here in the next couple of episodes. It's March 5th for us today, but hopefully by our April 5th episode in the next month, I will have some final details on how we got to close our seller finance for Richards, and pretty excited about it. But to move on to our next property, like I said, we had the college students that were in Richards, and then we found the Hoarder House. And the Hoarder House was a unique situation. We found it at a very good time to get the students to move from property A to property B. However, the woman that was living there, she was waiting on a waiting list to go into a retirement home. And so I think we bought it in like, let's say, let's say it was like December-ish time frame. And every month we would get like an update of like, hey, did she move out yet? Like, where's she at on the waiting list? And so we had to get the property by like,
So
we
you
wanted
you
to,
bought it in December or you got it under contract in
so we
December?
got it under contract in December, but then it was like a
And that was
month by, go ahead.
contingent that was contingent on her getting into this retirement home and then you would close once she got in.
Yes.
Okay.
So that helped us get a pretty decent deal on the property too. When we walked through it, I mean, there was stuff everywhere. And actually, I'm not even 100% sure if Dan and Jeff got to walk through the property originally. I just saw it on the market for like 90K, and I think I set up a showing and saw all the stuff in there. And Dan and Jeff might have made it to that, but regardless, I was like, we have to buy this property. I mean, it was in great shape. It just had stuff everywhere. And again, like a lot of people don't like if you want to buy something, you want to buy it right now. A lot of people will walk away from, hey, this might be a 6 to 12 month thing that you're waiting for because she's just on a waiting list. And so until she gets that, and then she needs this money from the sale to move there. So are you okay waiting this long to potentially get a property? And a lot of people don't want to wait that long. So patience in real estate can always, have value when you're buying too. A lot of patience helps you earn money or make money for owning a property longer. And this avenue, it helped us with getting the property. So it took us about 6 months of asking the realtor, like, hey, do we have an update? No, she's still on the waiting list, still on the waiting list. And then you get the call and
Yeah, typically this probably cuts out a lot of homeowners. And when you're trying to buy a property as an investor, you do not want to compete with homeowners because they're just always willing to pay more. They're not looking at it as an investment. They're looking to live there. And so if you can find properties that you're only really competing with other investors, that's where you're going to make money because all investors are trying to get it for a really good deal, right? So that 6 month waiting period, people, if they're looking to move, they probably don't want to wait that 6 months to move into this hoarded house.
yeah. And so we waited, we got the house. Not that we did a ton of work ourselves, but we did the hoarding removal by ourselves, and we had to get 2 dumpsters. And I mean, every room was just loaded. Like you could barely walk throughout the house because there was just so much stuff. But it was unique because it's like much stuff as there was, the house was still clean and in decent condition. I don't know if that's easy to understand when you think of stuff being everywhere, but it was still a really good house. And we were able to buy it for like 90,000, which at that time, most houses were like 140, 150. So we knew if we could buy this for 90 and just kind of clean it up a little bit, that we'd be able to, get kind of do the burst strategy on this one became our priority.
So did you all put more money into the business or did you use the cash out refinance from the first property as your down payment?
So we ended up doing the cash out refinance from the first property to get the money to fund the down payment for the second property and to use a little bit of that money for the renovations. So we basically did the BRRRR strategy long term on Richards and used that money for the hoarder house. And so once the hoarder house was fixed up and ready to go, we had the students move out from property A to property B. They liked the new house. Everything worked out pretty well. And then we went back to the bank and refinanced again and were able to pull out, all that money that we just had made through the burst strategy. I believe we got it to appraise for like 150 at the time. So I think we were able to pull out like another 20 to 30 grand or something like that.
So you each put in $8,000 and 2 years later you have your entire initial investment and you have two properties.
Pretty much. I mean, I think at first we put in like 15 was probably closer to the number. But yeah,
Just to have some reserves and do
yeah,
the renovation.
and we'll do the basement renovation at the other property. And yeah, to your point, like basically after 2 properties, we've already, at least exceeded that money in equity alone. And then we're able to pull the additional money out of the hoarder house, and then not that we paid ourselves back, kind of leave the money in the company and then like continue to look for new properties to grow and to purchase.
So is that one, what was it, 4 bedrooms?
Yeah, that had 3 bedrooms. It was like two upstairs. It had one massive bedroom in the attic, and then downstairs there was a basement that needed some remodeling to make a kind of look like it used to be a bedroom. So we turned it into a bedroom, kind of added a closet and did some slight renovations to that room. So now it's a 4 bedroom, 1.5 bathroom.
And that's still rented out to college kids today.
Yep, it's still been rented out to college kids today. I can maybe do a different episode on this entire process, but I think the one thing that stands out the most about this house after owning it for so long is we had like the worst case scenario, horror story, where we had a pipe burst about 2 years ago,
Mm.
and half the house was like flooded with water, and it was very scary, and unique to deal with. However, you call the handyman, he goes there, he shuts off the water, and then you call the insurance company and you start getting, an insurance quote, and they have to send adjusters out there and see exactly what had happened and like how much money you're entitled to, and you use that money to fix up the property, get it repaired, and like we ended up getting almost a completely remodeled brand new house out of a pipe burst, which not everything turning lemons into lemonade, but like try to do it the best you can. You take a bad scenario, you turn it into the best case that you can, and ended up working out really well. We were able to do an additional kind of cash out refinance on that property after the renovations and pull out even more equity. So it worked out really well for us. We still own that property today. It just got leased out about a month or so ago for next year, and we plan on keeping that property for a while now, and it's been very, very good to us.
Yeah, I remember you sending me that video of the flooding, and one of the pipes was it in the ceiling of the basement, and it literally was just like a waterfall, like running water, just a waterfall into the basement, like the entire
So
thing
it
was
was it
flooded.
was a ceiling in the attic, and basically what happened was the attic had a separate heating system from downstairs, and the kid that was living in the attic shut off his heat, and so it burst in the attic, and it was actually the first floor that had the waterfall, and then that was going into the basement. So there was water everywhere, and there was a lot of renovations that were repairs that were needed. It was definitely not enjoyable. I was hosting Christmas at my house. I
I think it was
actually,
at your house.
you were, yeah, I actually probably had COVID. I found out like right after the party that I was not feeling great, and like I was wondering why. And so yeah, had COVID, hosting a Christmas party with like 30 people, and had a pipe burst. So it was a very, unique trifecta for me that day. I would say it wasn't maybe my best day, but we powered through it, and I have nothing but good things to say about it now.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to buy real estate and hope that any of these things happen. But I have heard, I've never had to make a claim, but I've heard that most of the time when you have to make a big claim, you actually end up kind of better off. Like we know people that have had properties burnt down and they got basically way more money than the property was worth. Or in this case, you pay like your $2,000 deductible, but you have a brand new kitchen. So I'm just saying if things like that are scaring you into getting into real estate, they typically work out in your favor. Again, like you never want these things to happen. They're a huge pain in the butt to deal with. The kids don't have anywhere to live or whatever. But it's typically not like you're out 30, $40,000.
Yeah, I mean that's why you pay insurance, even though it's extremely expensive, and sometimes you question why the hell do I pay for insurance. That is why you pay for insurance for, freak situations like that, to put yourself in a good position to get back on your feet. It was definitely unique with the kids. We were lucky that it was on winter break that it happened, and we got there quick and fast, and our handyman handled the job as quickly as he could. He got the water out, prevented any mold growth, and then he started working on the repairs right away. It was a little bit unique. We had to kind of fund most of the project like up front while we were waiting for the insurance check to kind of come in. So that was, something that we did kind of out of pocket to make sure we could get the property done quicker so the kids could move in on time. I think there was maybe like a week delay where we might have put them up in like a hotel or something until the property was completely ready. But yeah, to your point, it's definitely not the most ideal scenario to deal with. But that's real estate. I mean, it's never going to be absolutely perfect. And in dealing with all that, I think when we got a final appraisal after the remodels, the property ended up appraising for like $270,000. So again, this is a property we bought for 90,000, had a hoarder issue. We had to remove a bunch of things, kind of remodeled, repainted, fixed up the house certain ways, and then had to put a new roof on it, do a lot of things just to get it up to like that 160 appraisal, and then a pipe burst. Next thing you know, we completely renovate the whole house, like had to remodel the kitchen, had to do a lot, and then you get a $270,000 appraisal. So buying real estate, holding it for a while, dealing with some of the issues. I mean, I'll take a significant increase in value like that, any day of the week.
And I'm assuming you also did a cash out refinance on this property as well at some point.
Yeah, yeah, we did. Sometimes in like I get loose with the term cash out refinance. Like in this scenario, the bank that we were using, they did a lot more like HELOCs on business properties, which was a little bit unique to me because I wasn't familiar with that being like a product that businesses or like that banks use for businesses. But that's what we ended up doing. We like kind of did a home equity line of credit at first to tap into that like extra 40K of equity that we had. But this was like right around 2019, so we kind of just sat on the two properties that we owned and we didn't do that much more for probably like 2 years because COVID happened. Everything was kind of weird during COVID and no one really knew what to do with their money. I mean, I was kind of pivoted off of real estate and I loved buying stocks at the moment, right? Like everybody I think became a stock trader during COVID for a little bit because everything was so cheap you could just buy it and like hope it was going to go up. And so I put my money there, maybe some of my attention. Like I also moved to Florida for a couple months during COVID, so it was a very unique time and we ended up not getting together like TDJ in general to buy another property until 2021 is really when we finalize like the refinances, getting the rest of our equity out, and then going to buy another property.
So 22 years go by, you still own both houses.
Yep.
They're both cash flowing pretty well. I believe at this time you were managing them yourselves, and you do this HELOC to buy a third property. So again, I'm assuming your buy box was the same. You're looking for 3 to 4 bedroom houses for college kids, same area. What did this third deal look like?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were looking for. This third property got listed pretty at like a decent price for 145, which was one of like the cheaper prices on the market. And I mean, not that we were always looking for price, but something that was like a little bit outdated where you can maybe add some value. And I mean, nothing to your point, like super extravagant. At this point, though, we started to look at the borough versus the township because the borough would allow you to rent to 5 students versus 4 students, because the township has a specific law where you can only rent to 4 people, blood related or less. And so we started looking strategically for the borough just to expand our buy box and find some properties where you could put some more students in there just to, 5 times 500 is a lot more than 5 times 4 or 4 times 500. So just to get the extra rent is kind of what we were looking for at this property. And it had a basement that had a bedroom on one side, but the other side looked like you could potentially put a bedroom in it. So we had the extra money from, the cash out refinance, and we decided to purchase this property and remodel like the basement and try to put a bedroom and an extra bathroom in there.
So you got it for 145?
Yep, 145. And then the renovations that we did were probably close to like 50 grand. We spent a lot of money putting this extra bedroom in there. There was some other like we wanted to put a door in the side of the house. Like we did like a decent amount of renovations, and it was anywhere from like 40 to 50 grand of work that we put into it to add the 5th bedroom. And we loved it. I mean, when it was completed, it looked great. Unfortunately, I think since we've purchased this house, we've only ever had four students in it. So a lot of the work we've done almost feels, say, like it wasn't worth it, but it was worth it because it added the bedroom in the or the bathroom in the basement. So that's been, I think, a value add. It's still a really good house. We think one day we will get the five students in there. But it's just been, sometimes like we bought it in May, which is a quick turnaround to get all that done by June 1st, when typically the students were moving in. I think we delayed the move-in time to August for this property when we originally purchased it. And then it hasn't been, smooth sailing, maybe getting the tenants there. We've had situations where we've had five kids commit and then one drops out, and then we're like, all right, do we want to relist this at like in April when there's probably no students, or like just kind of keep the four? And I know there's scenarios where you keep the price at what the price was, like of, the 2,500 versus dropping it down to the 2,000. So there's certain options. It hasn't been like the best performing property for what we've wanted to get out of it, but it's overall still been a pretty solid property for us, and we have the hopes that we are going to get the five students in there in the near future. It's actually currently vacant right now, so it's a property that we're trying to get students in there for next school year at the moment.
Yeah. But I think, even at the four bedrooms or the four students, if you look at the 1% rule, which for people that don't know is like the easiest initial, like, is this a good deal or not? It's obviously, it's not, doesn't guarantee that it's a good deal or not, but like you bought it for 145, let's say you put in 40, $50,000 for renovations. So let's just say you're all in for 200. It still gives you the 1% rule. And I think this is one of the reasons that you love college rentals is like, so property one, I want to just go back to it real quick. So you had the four kids in there before the HOA kicked you out. You were probably getting 2,000 in rent
Yep,
around, and then when you rented it out to the coach, your rent probably dropped to what?
like 13, I believe.
Yeah, so the having the four kids pay per bedroom is getting you 700 extra dollars per room. I mean, I actually I'm hearing a lot about rent by the room today. It's not necessarily college, but like I just saw a video on Instagram of Brandon Turner talking about like how would you invest in real estate today? And he was like, I'd buy a 10-bedroom house and rent it out per room. And you kind of figured that out like 8 years ago before it was like cool. Even you were doing it through college, and a lot of people today are doing it through like young professionals or like kind of people our
Yeah.
age that are renting a room. But it's kind of the same idea is that people, again, they're looking at what their rent is, and $400 or $500 is not that much, but it's allowing these properties to cash flow really well.
Well, and I mean, just to talk about today's market for the most part, like, I mean, I see this specifically in Florida, but a lot of what they're building right now are luxury apartments. It's not like they're just buying the apartment for the average, college grad that like can only afford 1,000 to 1,200 bucks a month. They're like these really nice luxury apartments. They have pool, hot tub, jacuzzi, gym, like spa, like you name it, they have it. And they're like $2,000 a month, 2,300 a month. So like you're taking almost your entire paycheck and it's going right to rent. And it's tough. And that's what helps, this rent by room strategy of what they're talking about for young professionals. Like if they can pay $500 a month to live in a nice house and have a decent living situation, it makes a lot of sense. And like to your point, I mean, this is almost like a little bit younger than young professional. It's just the college student market, but it was a way to get extra value in homes. And, also just being a college student and having landlords that didn't answer the phone or fix issues in a timely fashion, it felt like a simple thing to do. Like as long as we fix these properties up on time and, do right by the students, that it would, be good for them and like kind of a win-win situation.
Yeah, this is kind of an aside, but I just read something the other day that said like these luxury apartments are going to tank in value in the next couple years because everybody's building them. Like you're saying, they're popping up everywhere, and people can't afford to pay the rent to live there because they're just so expensive. But I don't know.
I mean,
I can't like judge the
yeah,
entire market, but
I, I'd say it's still got to be tough to tank because like even if they want $2,000 a month, like if you have 1,000 units and you're getting 1,800 a month, and it's still or 50, like it's still like even if they drop it a couple dollars, they're still getting a ton of money. So it'd be tough to meet. But like to your point, if you have an evaluation that requires you get $2,000 a month, and like maybe they're not gonna, qualify to make their payments or something like that on the loans that they've gotten. But on the road I live on alone, there's, I kid you not, at least five that are built, recently being built, and like two or three more in development. It's being absurd. And they're all like 200 plus apartment complexes, like in one development. It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so you still own this third property today. What did you end up doing with like banks, or have you refinanced that one?
Yeah, kind of like after we had these three properties, and like right after we purchased this one, and we kind of added the bedroom in the basement and did some of the remodeling there. We took all three properties actually back to our original bank, and we did what's called a portfolio loan. So we put all three properties on one loan, and we were able to do kind of like a cash out refinance with all three at one time. And that worked out really well for us because we were able to pull out like a lot of equity uh, based on just doing that like portfolio cash out refinance. So it was almost like a long term. It was like a burr on Luzerne, but then like almost a long term burr or just a cash out refinance. Again, like once you own real estate and it goes up in value, and you get lucky because of what happened during 2020, and how properties increased in value. We had a lot more equity in our properties, and this allowed us to pull that equity out.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you again, like you guys all put in this lump sum. A couple years go by, you have three properties, and sounds like you almost probably got all the money that you put in back in your pocket and able to buy more properties.
Yeah, and that's like, at the time, it wasn't always our plan to pay ourselves much. Over time, the company develops, and, things change. And so we're starting to migrate towards trying to pay us a couple dollars each month. I mean, it hasn't fully happened just yet, but it's going to start happening soon at some point in 2025, where we take a certain percentage, and it's like a profit first model that we're going to follow and start paying ourselves first. And so then you can look at the money that you're making on a month to month basis, and you try to grow that by buying better properties or selling, worse properties, and using that money to invest in something else. But yeah, we were definitely able to make our money back and then some. Now the three of us are partners in a company that's got a significant amount of equity, just the company in general. And, that's something that we get to split three ways. And it was all from generic conversation talking about real estate 7, 8 years ago. And, I know we'll talk more about TDJ in coming episodes because we have a couple more properties that we've purchased over time, but now we're up to six properties. So, went from one property in 2018 to six properties in 2024. And that's a, significant growth. Is that like what, one property per year kind of on average? And just doing that with, a couple people, it's, even if you're not doing the burst strategy and you're just putting the 15 grand in each year to buy one property, you can still see a ton of value of that going up over time. It's, partnerships have worked out very, very well for me. And I enjoy partnerships from this aspect of everything's not on me. There's other people you can talk to. There's other people that, can handle issues, and just like not maybe dealing with something completely on your own. Like if, a repair comes up, you have a pipe burst, and maybe we had to put a couple dollars in to fix that. Like it's split three ways versus just coming out of, your piggy bank. So
Yeah, and like you said, it's just more fun. Like you, before I owned as many properties, you would always call me and, talk about properties that you own. But once we own one together, it's just a lot more fun. We both have skin in the game, and we can kind of bounce ideas off each other and, come up. And one thing that I think's also pretty important is like multiple people force you to stay on track of your goal. Like I'm definitely guilty of like straying from the goal, and you are constantly keeping me on track of like, no, like this is what our goal is. We have to do the burn, get a good deal so that we, pull some money out to continue to grow. And I know like you've mentioned, you and Dan have been all gung ho about properties, and Jeff's like, no guys, like our strategy is this. We need to stick to our strategy. So it kind of, keeps you guys on track and responsible.
Yeah, I mean, not sometimes you can make a mistake or you can go too fast by yourself, and you're definitely slowed down in dealing with partners and getting everybody's decision and everybody's buy-in. I think there's a ton of value in that, but like the main thing is like it's fun. It's way more fun. Like you and I have talked about real estate a ton, right? I mean, obviously it's why we started the podcast because we were calling each other like every week, but our conversations, when I'm listening to your portfolio or you're listening to my portfolio, like our ears definitely perk up and the conversation changes once we get to talk about like our property and what we're doing together. Like it's way more interesting, it's way more fun. That's why we want to keep building it because I mean, real estate's great, building wealth is great, but then like who you're building real estate with is just as important and can make it like, almost from like just a financial gain or like how you're making your finances better. So like playing real life Monopoly like on a teammate, like with a teammate, like it's so much fun. So
Yeah, and if buying on your own is preventing you from getting started, would you rather have 33% of six properties or 100% of zero properties? I think most people would take the 33% all day.
yeah, and like to your point, just the experience factor. I mean, I've learned so much in these six properties that TDJ has purchased, and like to your point of like Jeff's ideas and Dan's ideas and like just blending everybody's opinions and ideas together. Like you learn a little bit and bits and pieces. And like I've used to exactly your point, some of Jeff's things like, hey, we can't buy this property unless there's a value add to do the burst strategy to get our money back out. And then to your point, like I've been adamant about that with you with how I want to grow our company because I don't want to get in a situation where we have to sit and wait on cash flow for 2 to 3 years before we can buy something else. And it's everything is a learning process and you learn by doing. At least a lot of people learn by doing. You can only read so much and listen so much to podcasts and books. And we've learned a ton just by doing these deals and it's helped, it's helped me a ton in my real estate journey.
Right, and the more you do, the better your network becomes. People take you more seriously. You're kind of at the top of their list because like, oh, Tommy has bought six properties from me in the past couple years. So like I know that he's serious about this versus if you just bought one in the last 6 years, kind of start to forget about you.
Yeah, yeah, it keeps you more, top of mind when it comes to, everybody that you're dealing with from the banker, from the realtor, and anybody else that might be involved kind of in your transaction, even like your attorney, like everybody else that you need to have conversations with. They know what you're doing and even the accountant, and you can start talking about growth strategies with them. Like, but everybody knows your goals are to buy more real estate and you're going to do, whatever you can to buy more.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it with the three properties. I guess what's one piece of advice that you would, after this experience of creating partners and having six properties, what's one piece of advice you'd have for people that want to get started?
I think it's you just have to exhaust all options. Like, don't give up. Everybody's looking for an excuse to not do something, right? Like, don't find the excuse, find the answer. And what is that answer? Do you have somebody in your family that's going to potentially loan you money that wants to do 50% of a deal with you, or you do all of the work? Do you have some buddies that might be interested in, going 50-50 or 33-33 or 25-25? Like just find the answer. Stop searching for the excuse, I think would be my biggest recommendation. And that answer can be looking into partnerships with friends, family, acquaintances. I mean, obviously make sure you know the person a little bit more than just an acquaintance, but somebody that you might trust that wants to fix their financial portfolio. I think the partnerships are a great way. And it's something that Brandon Turner literally just talked about the other day that is a very slept on way to build real estate. And he mentioned he would not be where he's at today without partnerships and what he's been able to do by using the knowledge of other people. I mean, go ahead and find other investors. Like other investors get strapped for cash. And if you have a couple dollars or if you want to do some work or maybe do management for them, like just find the answer and, get started.
Yeah, and well, one is I could probably take some of that advice. I think we both can actually of like me and you when we don't have enough money to buy properties, we don't really look for properties. When I say it all the time, at the end of the day, if you find a good deal, the money will come. If you find a really good deal, people want to invest in it. And even if me and you don't personally have the down payment and we find this really good deal, we will figure it out. We will find the answer. But also, I didn't really realize until I started investing in real estate that like all these huge high rises, like you were talking about the 200 unit, all these luxury apartments, like 90% of those are partnerships. They're not just people buying them themselves. Now in this,
Yeah.
it's called syndication, where one person, this is what Brandon Turner does now. And if it's like the third time we brought him up, if you can't tell, he's like our real estate hero. But he basically made a majority of his wealth, I believe. I don't want to I don't want to say anything wrong about him, but he is a he does syndications where he finds this deal of this 1,000 unit property, and then he gets 10 or 20 people to invest their money into it. So typically, like with these massive buildings, people aren't just paying cash for them, right? They're partnerships, and they might be, each person might only have 5% of the deal. So if you see like the super wealthy doing these syndication models, and doing partnerships, like, it makes sense for everyone else to do it.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to make money in real estate. And that's why you just need to get started, get the first property under your belt, let the equity accrue, and then you can change your mind later on if you decide, hey, I don't really want to be a landlord. I mean, you can take that equity and you can try to move it into your next primary residence and create value. And I have a buddy that's done that and he's made a ton of money just by, fixing up his primary residence and like kind of flipping the house that he's living in. He lives in a beautiful home for a couple of years, makes 200K in the house, and then goes and flips it and does it again. There's a ton of different ways. There's people that just take the 100K they've gained in equity and they start doing hard money, and now they're making 10, 12, 13% returns on their money. So, or you take that money and you go into a syndication for like 50K, and then now you're making 10 to 12% on that money just by joining a syndication like Ty's talking about. So again, biggest thing is to get started, like get that nest egg to grow. Real estate will help it grow, and then you can try to learn more about real estate and find something that is a better avenue for you if you don't want to be as hands-on of a landlord, if that's not the option for you.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. Good episode. I think next week we talk about your other two properties with TDJ potentially.
No, I think next week we'll wrap up. We had a really great purchase, TDJ did, and it really helped kind of take us to the next level. So I'm excited to tell that story to the world and to everybody, and just kind of run through the numbers of those properties. They're kind of our TDJ's favorite properties, some of the best deals that we've ever purchased. So we'll get into that next week. I have a really cool closing remark that I'll read to everybody. So remember, in real estate and in life, it's not just about what you know, it's about who you build with.